Story 1 Mindhunter, not because it had a bad ending, but because it does not have an ending. Story 2 Killing Eve, like many other series, has brilliant first seasons. Story 3 Has anyone watched Ragnarok on Netflix? The first couple of seasons were really cool. The last season was good, but the final episode made me think, I can't believe I wasted all this time watching this show. Story 4 Santa Clarita Diet was cancelled and ended on a cliffhanger. Story 5 Those donkeys cancelled it after just one season. Story 6 House of Cards. Great show. The last season is extremely awful for every reason. Story 7 Chuck. Literally everything that was built up over years was erased in the finale, and the main characters have to start again from scratch. Story 8 Carnivale. Great show, great cast, phenomenal unique world building, very atmospheric. Ended on a monumental cliffhanger. Unlike Deadwood, it is never getting a wrap-up movie. Story 9 I would say How I Met Your Mother. I love the humor of the series, the memorable characters, and the creativity of the story. However, the final season, particularly the last episode, left me feeling let down due to the way it wrapped up the long-running storyline. Story 10 Dark Crystal. Age of Resistance. No, I can't deprive anyone of its amazing work. I am still upset it got cancelled. Story 11 I would not know if the ending was bad because I stopped after season 5. Story 12 Lucifer is an overall great police show with a touch of supernatural elements that combine nicely. The final season is disappointing. Story 13 The Flash. To me, season 4 is the last good one. The cracks really begin showing afterward. Story 14 Death Note should have ended when L died. You cannot build up such good tension between two characters for so long just to kill him off and have the audience work to develop sympathy and attachment to new characters that are literally just a shadow of L. Story 15 If I enjoyed it, I will always recommend it. I remember watching Carnival with my friend, and we were both obsessed with it and recommended it to everyone. Another friend watched it because of us and got really mad after watching the finale because it was cancelled and left some things unresolved. I do not really care. I would rather watch a great show with a bad ending than a mediocre show that I do not care about with a great ending. Story 16 Last Man on Earth. Unfortunately, it was cancelled after a major season 4 cliffhanger. Story 17 I liked the first season of Pretty Little Liars but could never get past the second half of season 2 because it became dull. I have heard about the ending and the rest of the seasons from content creators who explain the entire plot to me, such as Mike's Mike, and that was a much better experience than watching it. In general, many shows by Roberto Aguirre Sacasa start off fun, but then he seems unsure of how to proceed, making them repetitive. Story 18 Scorpion. Absolutely loved it, but that ending makes me more mad than the Game of Thrones finale. Story 19 The Walking Dead. Loved it to death and used to try to get people to watch it, but there is no point now. Story 20 Oh no, I was so mad. I had watched that whole series only for the ending to be a choreographed dance distraction. Story 21 The first 2 seasons of Millennium were great and wrapped up nicely, but then it unexpectedly got picked up for another season. Season 3 was bad. Story 22 House of Cards. Because of the situation, it became a documentary anyway. Story 23 The Mentalist. All this build-up, all the tension, all the hints just to get to this? Story 24 The 1990s TV show Dinosaurs is a typical funny television program that showcases what a family of dinosaurs might experience if they were sentient. The final episode depicts all of them going extinct due to something they did, hinting at climate change. It is an incredibly jarring ending for a comedic show. The show was set 60 million years ago, as if from the beginning it was known that this would be the outcome. It remains one of the saddest endings ever. Story 25 I am thinking about Game of Thrones. The entire series is a masterpiece, featuring intrigue, battles, and dragons. However, the ending is like a spoiled cake that fell apart at the last second. Story 26 Battlestar Galactica. I really dislike that they landed on Earth. I feel a better ending would have been a time loop, where they end up being the 12th colony they were following from the beginning. Story 27 The newer Voltron is a lot of fun but fails horribly in the final stretch. Story 28. Game of Thrones is the only answer, in my opinion. The final episodes were so bad and wasted so much plotting and character development that, after completing the series, it felt like a giant waste of time to watch the whole thing. Shows like Dexter and How I Met Your Mother have awful final seasons, but they do not diminish the enjoyment of the earlier episodes and seasons. They can be enjoyed without ever knowing how the shows ended. Considering other shows mentioned, I think The Office had a drop in quality, but it was still an okay sitcom, just not as good as it had been. I think Lost is such a fun watch that, even if you do not like the ending, it was a fun ride. Story 29. The Flash's first few seasons were good. However, the change in showrunner practically doomed the series. What is most disappointing is that the writers involved are extremely capable, but they prioritized their own interests over what was best for the show. They introduced characters created for the comics, wrote a character as a self-insert, and gave them a romance plot. Story 30. Two of my favorite series of all time had final seasons that were a bizarre shift in tone and stakes. Babylon 5. Initially, the focus was on interstellar war and the fate of everything. We stop it, and then a whole season centers on corruption within a government department. Felt more like a spin-off than a continuation. The Wire. Brilliant seasons about police, drug dealers, and corrupt politics, followed by a final story about a dishonest reporter fabricating sources. This might have worked if woven through the other seasons, but on its own, it was a major letdown. Story 31. Drunk quaint work narrow like overconfident shrill chop desert rain. Story 32. Prison Break. I highly recommend anyone watch Season 1, which in my opinion is a masterpiece. Every episode ends with a compelling cliffhanger and is very addictive. Season 2 was okay. The rest are not recommended. Story 33. The Watcher. I know it is based on a true event, but my God. The whole TV show is a cliffhanger, building up the tension just to end without giving even a hint of a possible solution. Story 34. Barry seasons 1 through 3 are great, but season 4 was so bad I no longer recommend starting the show. Story 35. Season 5 of Gotham was terrible. Riverdale was not a great show, but it had that so bad it's good quality. However, the last season was unbearably bad in my opinion. Even for that show, I have no idea what the showrunners and writers were thinking with the final season. Everyone knows about the infamous lottery season of Roseanne. That was pretty unwatchable. Story 36. Okay, so I have read about 200 comments, and none of them, as far as I have seen, have mentioned this. The Owl House. I love The Owl House, and I still recommend it to others, but the ending was rushed, mostly due to cancellation. At least we got an ending. I wish we could see more of Luz and her friends in the human realm, not just one episode. How do the classmates feel about Luz changing like 3 times? I want to see Gus try everything humans do, like riding public transportation. Honestly, I wish it was longer, and I also really want to see more of the Collector interacting with other people. Story 37. The Walking Dead. The beginning was awesome. It had some really gripping moments for a while. Then it became repetitive. Story 38. Tales from the Loop. People think it is dumb. I loved the entire 1 season of it. Story 39. Netflix Dracula is a 3-part series. Seriously, listen to me when I say if you watch it, watch the first part, 2/3 of the second, and then make up your own ending. Story 40. I think a lot of people would say Lost. I liked the ending and felt it might have philosophical meaning, but I think most people would think they just did not know where they were going with the story and simply wrapped it up. Story 41. American Gods was cancelled, but I would still recommend it. It was a great series. Story 42. Veronica Mars was cancelled after 3 seasons. It performed exceptionally well when fans funded the Kickstarter for a movie about 7 years after it was cancelled. Hulu negatively affected the series by reviving it for a 4th season. I consider Season 4 to be a terrible alternate universe ending. Story 43. 2.5 Men. The ending and last few seasons were poor. Story 44. How I Met Your Mother. I understand why they had to commit to the ending, but after 8 or so years of brilliant story that made people laugh and cry, To betray the story and flip it on its head is just poisonous. They stuck the landing with Barney, though. It started out as a Tucker Max parody and then went layer by layer to find a really brilliant person. Story 45. Game of Thrones and How I Met Your Mother are both shows that I really loved. However, both completely ruined the ending to the point where it negatively affected the rest of the series. I have not rewatched either of these, and I doubt I ever will. What is the point when I know how they end? Story 46. The new series in the United Kingdom called Night Sleeper is brilliant and fast-paced. But I was disappointed by the ending. They had many character options to choose from for the ending, so it was a slight letdown. Story 47. I still recommend it. Wentworth is not the show ending, but a certain season finale marks the end for me. I've heard it's still good, but I cannot watch after that. I'll rewatch the show up to that point, but not beyond. I recommend the same for others. Story 48. Panty and Stocking. I mean, it was short, but the cliffhanger was just there, and there was never a second season. Story 49. Ozark. The entire Burt family should be dead, or at least most of them. Story 50. The Blacklist. I loved the mysteries and definitely loved the characters, but the ending was just awful. Felt rushed, did not make any sense, and left us with a lot of loose ends. Story 51. Scandal was very intense but remained excellent until about the last season and a half. However, the ending, not to mention the final season and its significant flaws, was very disappointing for the story that had been told throughout the series. Story 52. Inversely, I would suggest saying Dark. The show started strong, and each subsequent season got worse, but I kept watching because I was invested. Somehow, they managed to tie that mess together with an ending that was both satisfying and made sense within the world they created. Story 53. Honestly, it would be The Flash. Everything was really good in the early seasons, but I want to say once the future kids appeared, I started losing interest. Then I could not even bring myself to start season 9 because it just got so bad. Story 54. Final Space was phenomenal, but it was cancelled as a tax write-off in the middle of the series. Story 55. I really did not care for the ending of Netflix's Sweet Tooth. I loved every second of it up until the last few episodes. I know it followed the comic it was based on to some extent, but I never read that. Story 56. My honest answer is Devilman Crybaby. I mean, maybe the ending has a message, but the delivery made me so incredibly angry at how bad it is. It's not worth the suffering. Also, where is Dark? The writers lost their way in the last season. The mystery was not even there in the end. Story 57. Many of the names here, I thought of them negatively from the start. Some did not even reach the ending. There are some really great shows, though, with less than satisfactory endings. I will keep the list for myself. I do not want to tell people that the show they liked only became disappointing at the end. Story 58. I have to preemptively say The Witcher. There is maybe a 5% chance they can produce a quality work, and even if they do, it will still be a jarring and strange change of leads that is distracting regardless. Story 59. Stargate Universe, especially if you liked Stargate SG-1 and Stargate Atlantis. It was just getting up to speed when they cancelled it. Story 60. The Shield. Not that it was a bad ending artistically, but you become so involved with the strike team only to see them turn into a sad sack that it is hard to watch. Story 61. I would still recommend it, but the last few minutes of Battlestar Galactica really reshaped the series in a way that I felt cheapened it. I am not sure what I would have preferred, but it is still a great series up until then. Story 62. I don't remember how it ends, to be honest. Maybe I didn't watch it, or maybe I forgot. Story 63. One tough show for me is Northern Exposure. I would recommend it, but only if someone agrees to stop on the last Joel episode. Felt hollow after that. Not bad, but also incomplete. Story 64. Wonder Egg priority ending is one of the reasons. Another is the sexual harassment scene in episode 7. Also, Panty and Stocking's very last-minute plot twist gets an honorable mention. Story 65. Boardwalk Empire was an outstanding show when it first came out. The first 4 seasons were unreal, providing constant entertainment throughout, at least for me. Season 5 wasn't as good as the other seasons, but I thought it was doing well for most of it until the final moments of the last episode. I just felt so hollow. The ending felt like something that should have been building and hinted at, but in execution, it came out of nowhere. It wasn't awful, but it was very mediocre. I cannot recommend anyone watch it because it is so deflating. I think a bad ending might have even been better, and with how little I see it mentioned, I really think that ending helped erase Boardwalk Empire from everyone's memories. Story 66. Anyone that ends on a cliffhanger, such as My Name is Earl or Santa Clarita Diet. Story 67. Off the top of my head, I would say The Blacklist. Great show, great performances. However, the finale itself is pretty underwhelming. More importantly, the ending with the lead character is disappointing. They could have had a great conclusion, but they clearly did not want to stop making the show, so they continued for 2 more unnecessary seasons. Story 68. Game of Thrones. The final season and ending were very disappointing. Story 69. Buffy was incredible. The ending actually ruined my life. Story 70. The guy's parents kind of sell his soul to the devil, somewhat unintentionally. Once he turns 18 and finds out about this, the devil makes him a bounty hunter, returning souls that have escaped from hell due to overcrowding. It was a really fun show in the supernatural realm. The guy is a good person and wants a way out of belonging to the devil. At the end of a season, he and his girlfriend devise a plan to challenge the devil to a game to win back his soul. If he wins a game he believes gives him an advantage. However, something of equal value needs to be bet for the devil to participate, so they bet the soul of his girlfriend. The game happens, the devil wins, taking the girlfriend's soul as well. The season ends there, leaving a cliffhanger expecting a renewal. Unfortunately, the show was canceled, and the story remains unresolved. Some information has been shared by the showrunners about what they would have done if it had not been canceled, but it falls short of closure. Story 71. There was a show I loved called Ascension. It was advertised as a miniseries, but it ended on a cliffhanger. It was not meant to be a miniseries but something with multiple seasons. Story 72. Burn Notice. It was an exciting action-adventure show reminiscent of older 1980s series such as Magnum, P.I., and The A-Team. The series started strong but declined in quality during the final 2 seasons. Story 73. Blake's 7. Why has it not made it across the pond like other British Broadcasting Corporation shows? The ending reveals a crew member as a spy for the authoritarian leaders, who has all her crewmates killed. Story 74. Lost, Game of Thrones, The Walking Dead, basically any show with a bright premise and risk-taking, but where it is very clear they had no idea where to go with it and ran out of ideas, treating the last seasons like they are flushing a turd. Story 75. Lost in Space had a good vibe, but the ending was a total letdown. Story 76. The acting performances are spectacular. Not just Lee Sung-ji and Bae Suzy, who are great as expected, but the whole ensemble is excellent. The plot is riveting, the action is outstanding, the production values are amazing, and the soundtrack is excellent. However, the ending is very disappointing and undermines the entire series. I wish I had not invested the time or effort. Story 77. Midnight, Massachusetts. I was okay with the series and even the vampire elements, but the redemption at the end was impossible considering the plot. Story 78. Lost. Unlike Dexter, Game of Thrones, How I Met Your Mother, and others, this is the only one I would say was ruined so badly by the ending that you should not watch any of it. Story 79. Better Call Saul and Breaking Bad are both excellent shows. Stop Better Call Saul 3 episodes before the end, and stop Breaking Bad halfway through the last season before the plot where Hank discovers Walter is the meth king. Story 80. A few examples. Once Upon a Time, How I Met Your Mother, Scrubs, Community. The list is much longer. All good series have one thing in common. The last season is disappointing. Story 81. Death Note is truly a masterpiece and one of my favorites. However, the ending where Light dies in the lamest way possible is just disappointing. Story 82. Mr. Robot. I cannot believe the writers came back from a 5-year hiatus to finish the series with him waking up in a hospital bed and the whole show being his other persona. Story 83, Shogun. Loved almost every minute of it until the disappointing ending. Jesus Christ. Story 84, Chuck. A phenomenal show. It did for nerds what The Big Bang Theory could never accomplish in a million seasons. A pity that the postscript for the series is, Zachary Levi is a nerd traitor and a fascist. Story 85, Lost. I watched that show forever, waiting for a great ending and explanation. I never got it. Story 86. Lost messed up their explanations badly. I would never recommend it even though I enjoyed watching it at the time. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.